being involved in our project to try and raise some funds. Of course, no, never mind. Raise some funds for our theatre company. We're now up to 50 followers, which is fantastic when you think a week ago we just had 28, I think. Certainly not 50. So thank you so much if you have been in touch and commented. Oh, should point out as well, I've got a new camera set up here. Let me see if I can get it sorted. Hang on a minute more. I think I've just about managed to secure it. Yeah, as I mentioned, we're not very good at this. Someone did leave a comment as well and said, saying this is a new ASMR, soft-spoken whispering channel, but you launched 6 years ago. And I think he's probably right. I think we started the channel 6 years ago, or 5 years ago, some time ago anyway, and didn't really know what to do with it. Certainly didn't know that it depended on the number of followers as to how things would go. But so yes, we're about 3 or 4 videos in, if you have a look, and this is a new initiative to try and raise some finance. But also, I came across ASMR about 5 years ago. I'd never heard of it before. Excuse me. And I tend to use it every night anyway. Or John Butler, who's a right character. And if you know ASMR and you haven't checked out John Butler, because he doesn't actually do ASMR. He's just a very soft-spoken gentleman who talks about all sorts of philosophical things. And is very much into meditation. And talks about that quite a lot. If I say feet on the ground, you'll know what I mean if you've ever listened to John Butler. If you haven't, give him a go. But meantime, we're going to carry on with our collection from Charles Dickens, Christmas stories. The story that we started about 3 videos ago. And this is a book that I bought literally just a couple of weeks ago. I went into, where did I go? Oh yes, into London, Charing Cross Road, and saw this book. I think I've showed you before the opening. The price, £65. That's a lot of money, but it's a classic. Charles Dickens' Christmas stories. And now if I can find where we are. The Seven Poor Travellers, this story is called. Oh, and that's my Welsh bookmark from a lovely place in Wales, mid-Wales, Cardigan Bay. Go there quite often. It's lovely. I can't actually remember where we got to, but I'll carry on with where we have here about Private Richard Doubledick's insecurity, shall we say, that led him to have a very low self-worth, and he's been talking to his young captain with great effect. I'll go back a little bit more. Turn while you may retrieve the past and try, says the young captain. I will. I ask only for one witness, sir, cried Richard with a bursting heart. I understand you. I will be a watchful and a faithful one. I think this is where we got to. Oh, sorry, move this out of the way. I have heard from Private Richard Doubledick's own lips that he dropped down upon his knees, kissed that officer's hand, arose, and went out of the light of the dark, bright eyes, an altered man. In that year, 1799, the French were in Egypt, in Italy, in Germany. Where not? Napoleon Bonaparte had likewise begun to stir again against us in India, and most men could read the signs of the great troubles that were coming on. In the very next year, when we formed an alliance with Austria against him, Captain Taunton's regiment was on service in India, and there was not a finer non-commissioned officer in it, no, nor in the whole line, than Corporal Richard Doubledick. In 1801, the Indian Army were on the coast of Egypt. Next year was the year of the proclamation of the short peace, as they were recalled, and they were recalled. It had then become well known to thousands of men that wherever Captain Taunton, with the dark, bright eyes, led, there, close to him, ever at his side, firm as a rock, true as the sun and brave as Mars, would be certain to be found, while life beat in their hearts, that famous soldier, Sergeant Richard Doubledick. (1805). Besides being the great year of Trafalgar, was a year of hard fighting in India. That year saw such wonders done by a sergeant major who cut his way single-handed through a solid mass of men, recovered the colours of his regiment, which had been seized from the hand of a poor boy shot through the heart, and rescued his wounded captain, who was down, and in a very jungle of horses' hoofs and sabres, saw such wonders done, I say, by this brave sergeant major, that he was specially made the bearer of the colours he had won, and Ensign Richard Doubledick had risen from the ranks. Sorely cut up in every battle, but always reinforced by the bravest of men, for the fame of following the old colours, shot through and through, which Ensign Richard Doubledick had saved, inspired all breasts, this regiment fought its way through the Peninsular War, up to the investment of Badajoz in 1812. Again and again it had been cheered through the British ranks until the tears had sprung into men's eyes at the mere hearing of the mighty British voice so exultant in their valour. And there was not a drummer boy but knew the legend that wherever the two friends, Major Taunton, with the dark bright eyes, and Ensign Richard Doubledick, who was devoted to him, was seen to go, there the boldest spirits in the English army began wild to follow. One day at Badajoz, not in the great storming, but in repelling a hot sally of the besieged upon our men at work in the trenches who had given way, the two officers found themselves hurrying forward, face to face, against a party of French infantry who made a stand. There was an officer at their head, encouraging his men, a courageous, handsome, gallant officer of 35, whom Doubledick saw hurriedly, almost momentarily, but saw well. He particularly noticed this officer waving his sword and rallying his men with an eager and excited cry, where they fired in obedience to his gesture, and Major Taunton dropped. It was over in 10 minutes more, and Doubledick returned to the spot where he had laid the best friend man ever had on a coat spread upon the wet clay. Major Taunton's uniform was opened at the breast, and on his shirt were 3 little spots of blood. "Dear Doubledick," said he, "I am dying." "For the love of heaven, no," exclaimed the other, kneeling down beside him and passing his arm around his neck to raise his head. "Taunton, my preserver, my guardian angel, my witness, dearest, truest, kindest of human beings, Taunton, for God's sake." The bright, dark eyes, so very, very dark now in the pale face, smiled upon him, and the hand he had kissed 13 years ago laid itself fondly on his breast. "Write to my mother. You will see home again. Tell her how we became friends. It will comfort her, as it comforts me." He spoke no more, but faintly sighed for a moment towards his hair as it fluttered in the wind. The ensign understood him. He smiled again when he saw that, and gently turning his face over on the supporting arm, as if for rest, died, with his hand upon the breast in which he had revived a soul. No dry eye looked on Ensign Richard Doubledick that melancholy day. He buried his friend on the field and became a lone, bereaved man. Beyond his duty, he appeared to have but two remaining cares in life. One, to preserve the little packet of hair he was to give to Taunton's mother. The other, to encounter that French officer who had rallied the men under whose fire Taunton fell. A new legend now began to circulate amongst our troops, and it was that, when he and the French officer came face to face once more, there would be weeping in France. The war went on, and through it went the exact picture of the French officer on the one side and the bodily reality upon the other, until the Battle of Toulouse was fought. In the return sent home appeared these words: "Severely wounded, but not dangerously. Lieutenant Richard Doubledick." At midsummer time, in the year 1814, Lieutenant Richard Doubledick, now a brown soldier, 37 years of age, came home to England, invalided. That's right. He brought the hair with him, near his heart. Many a French officer had he seen since that day. Many a dreadful night in searching with men and lanterns for his wounded. He had relieved French officers lying disabled, but the mental picture and the reality had never come together. Though he was weak and suffered pain, he lost not an hour in getting down to Frome in Somersetshire, where Taunton's mother lived. In the sweet, compassionate words that naturally present themselves to the mind tonight, he was the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. It was a Sunday evening, and the lady sat at her quiet garden window reading the Bible, reading to herself in a trembling voice that very passage in it, as I have heard him tell. He heard the words, "Young man, I say unto thee, arise." He had to pass the window, and the bright dark eyes of his debased time seemed to look at him. Her heart told her who he was. She came to the door quickly and fell upon his neck. "He saved me from ruin, made me a human creature, won me from infamy and shame. Oh God, forever bless him, as he will, he will." "He will," the lady answered. "I know he is in heaven." Then she piteously cried, "But oh, my darling boy, my darling boy." Never from the hour when Private Richard Doubledick enlisted at Chatham, at the private, corporal, sergeant, sergeant major, ensign, or lieutenant, breathed his right name, or the name of Mary Marshall, or a word of the story of his life into any ear except his reclaimers. That previous scene in his existence was closed. He had firmly resolved that his expiation would be to live unknown, to disturb no more the peace had long grown over his old offences, to let it be revealed when he was dead that he had striven and suffered, and had never forgotten. And then, if they could forgive him and believe him, well, it would be time enough. Time enough. But that night, remembering the words he had cherished for 2 years, tell her how we became friends. It will comfort her as it comforts me. He related everything. It gradually seemed to him as if in his maturity he had recovered a mother. It gradually seemed to her as if in her bereavement she had found a son. During his stay in England, the quiet garden into which he had slowly and painfully crept, a stranger, became the boundary of his home. When he was able to rejoin his regiment in the spring, he left the garden, thinking, was this indeed the first time he had ever turned his face towards the old colours with a woman's blessing? He followed them, so ragged, so scarred and pierced now that they would scarcely hold together, to Quartrebrass and Ligny. He stood beside them in an awful stillness of many men, shadowy through the mist and drizzle of a wet June forenoon on the field of Waterloo. And down to that hour, the picture in his mind of the French officer had never been compared with the reality. The famous regiment was in action early in the battle, and received its first check in many an uneventful year when he was seen to fall. But it swept on to avenge him, and left behind it no such creature in the world of consciousness as Lieutenant Richard Doubledick. Through pits of mire and pools of rain, along deep ditches and once roads that were pounded and ploughed to pieces by artillery, heavy wagons, tramp of men and horses, and the struggle of every wheeled thing that could carry wounded soldiers, jolted amongst the dying and the dead, so disfigured by blood and mud as to be hardly recognisable for humanity, undisturbed by the moaning of men and the shrieking of horses which, newly taken from the peaceful pursuits of life, could not endure the sight of the stragglers living by the wayside, never to resume their toilsome journey, dead as to any sentient life that was in it, and yet alive. The form that had been Lieutenant Richard Doubledick, and with whose praises England rang, was conveyed to Brussels. There it was tenderly laid down in hospital, and there it lay, week after week, through the long bright summer days, until the harvest, spared by war, had ripened and was gathered in. And we might leave him there, just because I'm aware of the time, and keeping you, hopefully I'm not keeping you awake. It's an interesting story, isn't it? I mean, a bit kind of bloodthirsty and a bit empirical, I suppose, but it was written in the 1800s. But what will happen to Richard Doubledick? We have yet to find out. But thank you so much once again for staying with us this long. And as I mentioned before, we're trying to raise money for theatrical productions. I've got a version of Hamlet, I think I mentioned, that's going to hopefully be touring the UK and possibly the United States of America next year. And my version of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens is opening off Broadway with another producer at the Soho Playhouse, which is very exciting, and I'm kind of trying to come up with reasons and excuses to go there, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. Not when I spend £65 on second-hand books. But thank you so much for your time and your attention, and please do leave a comment. It'd be lovely to hear from you. Always answer the comments. And again, if you haven't, then perhaps you wouldn't mind subscribing. Someone did comment that I should do a running commentary on the number of subscribers, and I shall certainly do that. So thank you again for your time. sorry about my little cold, which is still sniffling away in the background. And yeah, hopefully this has been quite relaxing, and I should do another one over the next few days. I think we'll see what happens to Doubledick. Thanks for following us if you haven't already. On behalf of Charles Dickens, as always, bless us all, everyone.